Nothing better than a smoke to remind you you're alive.
I call myself a Platinum Game Show all the time, but to be honest, I have a lot of issues with things they do and carry over into subsequent games. Mandatory graded fights that happen to be hidden, obtuse mechanics that never feel like they're properly explained in the game, the Gauntlet. Can I even call myself a Platinum fan at this point? Well, my favorite Platinum title is Vanquish. I've talked about Vanquish before along with Binary Domain in my first ever passing thoughts, but I've always wanted to go in depth with my favorite action game. The reason why I love Vanquish is because all those things I don't like from Platinum's other titles don't exist in Vanquish.
Said no bullshit.
The beauty of Vanquish lies in its simplicity. It's a third-person shooter that's equal parts Gears of War and Bayonetta. It comments on Bush-era foreign policy without getting mired in the particularities of its themes.
To those who have committed this heinous act, we say firmly, we will not negotiate with those who wish to destroy us.
Forget it. We've both heard enough speeches about higher causes by now.
It's a game that Shinji Mikami does not remember turning out the way it did from his original pitch to Platinum. Vanquish is a 2010 third-person shooter developed by Platinum Games and published by Sega. It's Platinum's fourth title and was directed by Shinji Mikami. Mikami is best known for being the director of the first Resident Evil way back in '98, and for directing Resident Evil 4 in 2005. When Capcom established Clover Studios to develop some of their more creative works for the early 2000s, Mikami directed God Hand just to blow off some steam and made one of the most unique character action games of all time. The takeaway from this bit is that if you put Shinji Mikami in the director's chair, you're gonna get one hell of an experience. Vanquish is no different. It's a game that stood in stark contrast to the rest of the Gears of War copycats that pervaded the market in the 7th and early 8th gen. Vanquish understood that the appeal of Gears of War wasn't that it was easy to plop the stop-and-pop combat into its gameplay and call it a day. Gears combat shines when the player takes advantage of positioning and enemy placement in combat arenas. Roadie running through gunfire to flank enemies and catch them off guard is the real draw to cover-based shooting. Vanquish asks a simple question. What if we took the roadie run from Gears of War and made it good? This is still the coolest way to move around an arena during a gunfight that's ever been conceived. I can explain the appeal to Vanquish's combat by describing the first big arena fight in the game. Act 1, Mission 3, is a nod to the fountain set piece from Gears of War. It's also a testing ground for the player to figure out how to approach all of the various threats they'll face in the game. The big difference between this arena and Gears Fountain is how the rear section of the arena is more open with its cover layout. The front part allows Sam to tuck under the walls and peek out to fire enemies like a conventional cover shooter, but by opening up the rear section, Sam can maneuver himself around the battlefield and flank enemies while the Marines draw their fire. Once you clear the ground level, the upper level opens up and more infantry units come in with a larger unit as backup. Once the upper level is cleared, more enemies come in through dropships and the positions change between the Marines and the machines. Now the Marines are looking down from the upper level while the machines drop in at the ground level. It's almost like coming back from halftime during a sports game and having a team switch sides. But we ain't done yet.
A heat source is coming up from within the substructure.
Need a bit more intel than that.
Data analysis complete. It's highly probable we're looking at the Russian KNRB-0 Argus robot that's been at the center of the arms control debate.
Oh shit! I think I'm gonna need a bigger gun.
First boss fight incoming, and this thing is just as dynamic as the rest of the game. You can use a turret to take down the boss's legs to expose its core, or save the ammo for when the boss changes into its second form. By the end of this boss fight, you've had 5 different fights in the same arena, all back to back. The entire game is like this, and it's awesome. Sometimes the game slows the pace down for a stealth section, or a creepy dark tunnel set piece that's also an escort quest, but there's always a sense of forward momentum in the story. Have I even talked about this game's plot? In the far future, mankind has branched off into the stars, and a small fraction live in a space colony named the SC-01 Providence. A rogue branch of the Russian military, known as the Order of the Russian Star, invade the Providence and take control of the colony. Turns out that the solar battery that powers the colony can also be used to power a laser, which the Russian Star uses to wipe out all of San Francisco. I've always been curious if this POV death was meant to reference the nuke moment in Modern Warfare 1. The United States sends their Marines off to retake the colony with the help of DARPA.
Oh yeah. This is Sam. DARPA sent him to come along with us.
Enter Sam Gideon, DARPA operative, and test monkey for their experimental augmented reaction suit, or ARS.
This the toy you've been working on? Not even scratched. You did get some training in this thing, right?
Our simulators are very thorough. They did quite a number on you, huh? We could use you as a test subject at DARPA.
What the fuck, man?
Going in hard and fast. All units, proceed to the ramps.
You're not allowed to smoke on the ship.
Sam Gideon is my spirit animal, the perfect ratio of asshole and cool dude. His support team consists of only one person, Elena Ivanova. She spends the entire game in a Metroid ship near the Providence and helps Sam hack machinery that'll help him progress. The ARS was designed by the same scientist who made the solar battery that powers the Providence. That scientist ended up captured by the Order of the Russian Star, and Sam's real reason for working with the Marines is to find out what happened to Professor Candide. Heading the operation is Robert Burns. He's everything you'd expect a Marine in a macho 80s movie would be if they had a bionic right arm that transforms into a Gatling gun.
Miss me, sweetheart?
Jesus, you? I liked you better when I thought you were dead.
I liked you better when I didn't have to hear your shit. Let's go.
Sam and Burns may not get along, but they do have to work together.
Gonna hurt!
I'm getting good at this falling out of transports thing, don't you think?
More like getting good at looking like an asshole.
A lot of the tension in their dynamic stems from Burns prioritizing the mission over his men's well-being, as opposed to Sam's genuine concern for others.
Burns, look.
They're just trying to lure us.
I know that.
You want me to sacrifice an entire unit to help 3 men?
No, let me do it. You just keep your eyes up my ass.
When Sam does find Candide, a mysterious figure gets in his way.
What the hell is that thing?
That will be fun enough.
Zaitsev!
This is Viktor Zaitsev, the operating leader of the Order of the Russian Star. He is peak platinum rival with a smug grin and better gear that outclasses the Rs.
try this.
Sam's not that impressed with his fancy suit.
Moving pretty good for a knockoff. The added thrusters. Might as well have put a big fucking spoiler on the damn thing.
I don't want to get too bogged down into the game's plot, because the game doesn't even do that. Once the game establishes a basic premise, the rest of the story focuses on the winding path that Sam and Bravo Company have to take to get to the heart of the space colony. The characters do have backstory, but they're relegated to loading screens that you will never see on the PC version because of how fast the game loads. I want to highlight a few character details that get lost as a result of that optimization. Sam used to be a football star until he suffered an injury that ended his career. That's what pushed him to go into DARPA.
Played college ball, you know.
That's a cushy Ivy League school.
If you take a look at his suit's design and squint, it gives off the silhouette of a football player. He's not bulky like a defensive lineman, but sleek like a running back. Sam's design informs how he should be played, as someone who goes deep into enemy territory while using the Marines as a distraction. Moreover, his white suit stands in stark contrast to the drab military fatigues that the Marines wear. It reinforces his nature as someone who isn't a soldier in the official sense, because, as Sam says early in the game, he answers directly to the President and the Secretary of Defense.
Private Daniel Grossi, MSOB-2, sir. I was stationed here so I can take you to the enemy positions.
Lead on, Private.
This way, sir.
Burns also has some interesting design elements that inform his character. His bionic arm conceals a Gatling gun and ballistic shield, and symbolizes his commitment to the military and the mission. At the risk of giving away spoilers early on in this video, it's important to note that it's his right arm that's bionic, and that foreshadows a similar design in Jetstream Sam and Metal Gear Rising, which in my mind feels like an expansion on the themes that Vanquish touched on. There's not much to point out in Elena's design, other than I think that it proves my theory that Shinji Mikami has a type. Short hair, short skirt, tall boots. Need examples? Resident Evil 4's Ashley Graham. Short hair, short skirt, tall boots.
I see that the president's equipped his daughter with ballistics, too.
How rude! And I don't believe there's any relevance with my figure and my standing.
God Hands Olivia. Short hair, short skirt, tall boots.
Gene, this place reeks.
I know. Wait, you don't expect me to mop up, do you?
Come on, those guys are cake.
Not to mention, much sexier than you.
Well, your sexy little friends. They're coming for a dance.
They're still sexier than you are.
Money on the table, someone's gonna bring up the evil within in the comments to undermine my theory. The other thing about Elena's scenes is that's where the cutscenes exhibit the worst slowdowns. Vanquish originally ran at 30 FPS, and when it got ported to the PC, its frame rate increased to 60. But for some reason, probably the holographic controls on Elena's ship, the game exhibits serious slowdown and desyncing in the cutscenes. I even tried the PS4 port to see if the game ran at a more consistent rate, but if anything, it makes the cutscenes feel more jittery than the PC port. If you ever plan on getting into this game, here are a few tips because there's an okay way to play Vanquish, and then there's a fun way to play Vanquish. The natural inclination to playing the game is to treat it like a standard Gears clone. Stick to cover, pop out to shoot some rounds, and move on to the next fight. At the end of every chapter, you get a score screen showing you various stats, one of them being the total amount of time you spent in cover. This should be your motivation to spend as little time in cover as possible. I'm not saying never go into cover, because there are moments where you overextend yourself and need to get behind a wall and have your suit recharge, but you should be keeping an eye on your energy meter as you move around the map. First thing you need to learn, tap boosting. Holding down left bumper activates the suit's boost function. Boosting consumes energy. Pressing A while Sam is moving will cause him to do a dodge roll. You can alternate between boosting and dodging by either alternating between tapping LB and A or holding down LB and tapping A. Why do this? Because while the suit's energy meter is recovering, if you start boosting again, there's a slight delay in the energy meter detecting that Sam is boosting. Tap boosting prevents the suit from ever recognizing that Sam is boosting while still keeping the momentum of a constant boost. Now that you effectively have infinite energy, you can use that meter for combat. Left trigger causes Sam to aim down sights. If Sam goes into ADS after doing a certain action, like dodge rolling or vaulting over cover, the suit activates reflex mode, which is the game's version of bullet time. When you trigger reflex mode, a timer appears near Sam's crosshairs to show how much energy meter is being used up. Always keep an eye on your meter and think about your escape routes if you need to do a tactical retreat and recharge your meter. You know how you can tell that Vanquish is a Platinum game, despite being in a completely different genre from other Platinum titles? You can taunt in this game. If you put Sam in the cover and press left bumper, the boost button, Sam will light up a smoke and toss it aside. The enemies will notice the cigarette's heat signature and momentarily focus all of their fire on the cigarette. This is a great way to draw aggro away from Sam, but you only have 3 SIGs available per arena. The next important thing you need to learn about Vanquish: the upgrade system. Sam is equipped with a unique weapons platform called the Battlefield Logic Adaptable Electronic System, or Blade. The Blade will scan any weapon on the battlefield and create an exact duplicate for Sam to use that also consumes the same ammo as a scanned weapon. The Blade can store up to 3 weapons that Sam can switch to on the fly with the press of the up, right, and down D-pad buttons. Pressing left on the D-pad swaps out either fragged or EMP grenades. The way guns upgrade in Vanquish is clunky, but effective. If Sam has a certain weapon stored in his blade and he picks up the same weapon, one of 2 things will happen. If Sam's gun needs ammo, picking up the same weapon will fully restore Sam's ammo for that gun. On the other hand, if Sam's gun has full ammo, picking up the weapon will store an upgrade charge on that gun. Fill up enough charges and the gun will eventually upgrade. Upgrading guns improves various stats, from their firepower, ammo capacity, and accuracy. You can also pick up upgrade nodes that fully upgrade an equipped weapon to the next level, but these are rare and will spawn depending on certain factors, such as if you destroy a new enemy type for the first time or get a set number of kills with a new gun. Upgrade nodes also completely refill a gun's ammo. Here's how you cheese the upgrade system. Once you've cleared an arena of enemies, open up all of the chests to see what guns are available. If you have any of those guns in your stock, look for a gun that isn't in your blade at the moment. Swap it out with a gun you want to upgrade, pick up the gun with full ammo, and then go back to the gun you had swapped out earlier, so that you can refill the upgrade charge. It's a very tedious process, and you really don't have to do this to beat the game, but if you want to min-max the experience, it's entirely up to you. I really like the weapon variety in Vanquish. There are 3 types of automatic rifles in the game, but they all feel different in terms of their impact and range, in a way that I usually don't see in other games. The assault rifle is one of Sam's starting guns and is color-coded to match his suit. It's the gun that gets featured on all the box art with Sam because of how it's meant to look like part of the suit. It's a good overall gun that can address any issue. Something I noticed when I recorded the game's tutorial for this video was that part of the assault rifle's reload animation has Sam pull on a charging handle at the back of the upper receiver, like an AR-15. That was a cute touch. The heavy machine gun has less firepower than the assault rifle, but packs a stronger punch. Headshotting basic infantry units at close range only needs a couple of rounds. A good alternative to the assault rifle, but performs worse at long-range targets. The boost machine gun has the lowest ammo capacity for automatic rifles, but has the strongest firepower overall. At higher levels, it can penetrate cover. It's a strong weapon, but don't make it your workhorse, as ammo is scarce. The shotgun is a slumbering beast of a weapon. It seems like any other shotgun in a video game, but you get the most out of it by getting in close with an enemy and landing a meat shot. Well, they wouldn't be meat as all of the enemies are robotic, but you know what I mean. Besides the raw firepower, the shotgun has a stagger effect on certain enemies, like the Romanovs, that make it great for crowd control in certain situations. The sniper rifle is a decent enough weapon, but it's ill-suited for the type of run-and-gunning action that Vanquish demands. It's the only gun that has a built-in suppressor, and will probably be at its most useful during the stealth set piece on one of the game's tram rides. The gimmicky weapons also have their place in the game, but I'll admit to never really using them on a standard run. The low-frequency energy gun is cool because its shots will penetrate and go through several enemies, and has a knockback effect. but the shots themselves are really slow and have a limited effective range. It's good for crowd control on basic infantry, but so is a shotgun. The lock-on laser is great for its fire and forget capabilities, but you can only get the most use out of it after a few upgrades, because a single shot doesn't outright destroy basic infantry. The rocket launcher is fantastic for boss fights and stronger enemies, but you'll never be able to increase its 3-shot capacity with upgrades. The disc launcher looks cool, but it's useful not because it's a gun, but because of its melee attack. Pressing B will cause Sam to do a melee attack, which changes based on which type of gun he's got equipped. The thing is, doing a melee attack uses up all of Sam's energy meter. It's meant to be an oh shit button that you press when an enemy is too close for comfort. However, if you use a disc launcher's melee attack, it doesn't consume energy meter at all, and instead uses up an ammo charge. Personally, I avoid the disc launcher because it can leave behind injured enemies who will usually go into self-destruct mode. Before making this video, I never touched a laser cannon as it used up the suit's energy for ammo, but it's actually a pretty decent replacement for the assault rifle. Cleans up basic infantry units well enough, but doesn't have the stopping power or raw damage to put down a Romanov. The other interesting thing about the laser cannon is that it has the lowest number of upgrade levels. Because of this and the fact that it doesn't have its own ammo pool, it's best to prioritize other guns when collecting upgrade nodes, and upgrade the laser cannon by picking up duplicates along the way. I saved the best gun for last because it's my personal favorite, the anti-armor pistol. What do you get when you take the damage from a single shotgun pellet and combine it with half the accuracy of the sniper rifle's scope? I saved this gun in the early game for boss fights and if I need to take down some Romanovs because of how effective it is. Unfortunately, the AA pistol rarely spawns from chests or marines, so I tend to favor it whenever I get a new upgrade node. What makes the AA pistol so good is that it holds 60 rounds when maxed out. 60 rounds of magnum ammo. You can clear out entire rooms with this gun in the middle portion of the game. I said before that Sam can switch grenade types between frag and EMP grenades. You can toss them like you would in any other shooter, or you can go into reflex mode and shoot them in mid-air for a wider range and to make sure that enemies are caught in the blast radius. Frags are great for wiping out crowds of basic infantry. EMPs are incredibly versatile because you can use them to stun enemies around you when you burn out your meter as a way to avoid damage, or to keep a really strong enemy stunned as you keep stacking damage so that they can never let off an attack. Grenades will only upgrade if you pick them up with a full stock. Besides chests, the best way to get new weapons is to revive any downed marines. They'll drop a gun in return for the help. It's a cool way to incentivize protecting NPCs, as well as supporting Sam's characterization as someone who cares more about saving lives than burns. The enemy units in Vanquish are all machines. I've been theorizing that the reason for this is because Japan isn't fond of showing blood or gore in its games, and this was the workaround that Sega did with both Vanquish and Binary Domain, so that they could have shooters where you mow down thousands of bodies without receiving the equivalent of an AO rating in Japan. Vanquish's enemy roster doesn't look very unique at first glance, but it does something I like. Once you understand how an enemy type works, you can apply your understanding to variants of that enemy type that appear later in the game. The basic infantry units are called Gorgies, and they make up the bulk of the Russian Tsar's forces. They usually come in red with stronger captain type units in orange. The white versions are sniper variants, and the blue versions are shock troops that have thrusters that allow them to zip around the arena, like Sam. Always make sure to finish off Gorgies because they have a desperation attack where they'll crawl towards the nearest target and detonate. It's an instant kill. The larger units are called Romanovs. They have sturdy armor, but their weak points are typically found either on their heads or the exhaust ports found on their backs. The red types either have flamethrowers that can burn through Sam's energy reserves if he gets too close, or carry a cannon on their backs that can launch a slow-moving missile that deals serious damage. If you can shoot the missile while it's still close to the Romanov, the missile has a chance of destroying its owner. The one with drill arms can burrow underground as well as do a stinger attack. All Romanovs have a chest laser attack that counts as an instant kill. One of the largest enemy units you'll often face in the game is the Argus. It comes in two forms, Spider Tank and Bipedal. The Spider Tank is easy to fight because its core is exposed on top of its cannon, but the Bipedal form conceals its core until you can stun it by dealing damage to any of its glowing parts. You gotta be careful when shooting their cores because they'll emit EMP waves that can wipe out Sam's energy if he gets hit. What makes the Argus fights interesting is that each encounter has a unique way of finishing off the unit. You know how some action games will feature strong enemy types that need to be finished off with QTEs, and after a while you get used to doing the same prompt again and again? That's not the case with these guys. The first one you'll ever fight has Sam redirecting one of its missiles back into its arm cannon. Another Argus fight has Sam fighting two in the same arena, and each unit has a unique finisher. One of the later fights is especially nasty, because if you're too far away from the unit when it finally goes down, you're likely to get caught in its instant kill laser attack that it does as a desperation move. One set piece features an Argus that you don't fight, but it's being used to rain down heavy fire on a hill that you have to run up as enemies keep flooding in from the base at the top. Another big enemy type is the buzzard that appears late in the game. They're not too bad, but they're usually paired up with ads that can distract you. If you're good enough, you can kill the one that attacks you on this tram ride early on and spend 5 minutes peacefully enjoying the scenery. There are also tank units, but they're not that special. Just circle around them and empty your AA pistol into their exhaust ports on the rear. The late game has some really out there enemy types, like the Unknown. Where most of the enemy units in the game share common design elements, the Unknown is a tiny little core on legs that wraps itself in layers of scrap metal and shoots lasers. It's intimidating the first time you see it, but the core is susceptible to the laser cannon's DPS, and you can chew through the core's health if you stun it with an EMP grenade and hit it with shotgun rounds at close range over and over again. The most intimidating enemy type in the game is the Crystal Viper.
Who the hell invited the chandelier?
Cute, Sam. That thing's an Assassin RI, a test version. NATO calls them Crystal Vipers. Its light refracting armor serves both as camouflage and as a shield against penetrative and polarized attacks. Optical weapons are useless on it.
This is starting to sound like a bad video game.
It looks like the T-1000 from Terminator 2 and even has the same blade arm attack, but it also has a Predator's cloaking technology. Sometimes it does a running attack that you can counter if your reflexes are fast enough. There's no real hard counter to the Crystal Viper, as it reflects energy attacks like the laser cannon and LFE rounds. Just like the Unknown, it's best to stun it with an EMP and unload your strongest guns into its chest, like the AA pistol or the shotgun. So the big spoiler in the game's plot is that Burns is actually romantically involved with President Hillary Clinton, which is info you'll only find in the loading screens that you can't read, because the game is too well optimized. But it also turns out that Hillary Clinton was in bed politically with the Russians, but screwed them over, so the Order of the Russian Star took over the Providence as revenge. Hillary sent in Burns to clean up the mess, and while San Francisco wasn't part of the plan to create an economic stimulus package, his words, not mine, it was still considered a net positive for the country.
War is not economic stimulus. San Francisco is gone now.
That was for the good of all Americans.
Burns kills Candide, and Sam confronts Burns and the Marines. The Marines aren't that much of a step up in challenge compared to the machines, but most of them have jetpacks and will be airborne during fights. They also carry sniper rifles and can put Sam in critical condition if he's not careful. Burns gets decked out with an upgraded ballistic shield and some TIMs that let him healy out of rooms. His fight stretches out over one last tram ride and into a room full of Marines. This can be a really dicey fight even on normal, but if you're good enough and have a strong enough gun, you can bring Burns' health down to 0 well before you even step foot in the final room, and one last shot in that room will automatically end the fight. After losing to Sam, Burns has a change of heart and sends Sam off while he takes care of the remaining Marines, who are still loyal to the President.
My men are dead. I belong with them.
As Sam makes his way to the escape pods, he runs into Zaitsev one more time, but now he's got company. Vanquish's final boss fight features Zaitsev and an extra bogey. Once you defeat one of them, Sam goes into a QTE, where he destroys it, but now the second bogey goes into sicko mode. He moves fast even in reflex mode, and this is where Sam will ask Elena to release the suit's inhibitors, which translates to having an energy meter that's double its usual length, and the bogey unit moving at a slower pace in reflex mode. But if you're good enough, you'll never have to release your cringe inhibitors.
The wrong one, I'm afraid.
Pain in the ass.
Did I mention that I love this game? Surprise! Turns out that the bogies were slave units that Zaitsev was controlling remotely this entire time. Say what you will about his methods, but Zaitsev is an effective troll. Once it's clear that Burns failed his mission, Hillary Clinton goes full Epstein instead of answering for all the lives lost as a result of her dealings with terrorists. This game is so ballsy to have this scene in 2010. Sam makes his way to an escape pod and reaches Elena's ship. As the two look on over Earth, Sam wonders whether he's any better than Burns, since he sacrificed the Marines to complete his mission. But in the end, it doesn't matter, because this game will probably never get a sequel. And I'm okay with that. The story is not the game's strongest point. It's there to get Sam and the Marines to go all over the space colony. The real draw to Vanquish is how quickly and seamlessly the gameplay shifts between combat and set pieces. If you play this game while watching all of the cutscenes, it'll take you 6 hours to beat. If you're just rushing through the gameplay, it'll take you about 2.5 hours. I love this game to bits. Sam is the right kind of smug and cool, and it's super easy to drop into a new session and just start playing the game. A lot of games nowadays tend to bog down gameplay with staggered tutorial segments that can go on for the entire campaign. Not Vanquish. If you forget how to play the game, you can do the tutorial from the main menu or when you start a fresh run. Play Vanquish. It's always dirt cheap on Steam, and it's bundled with Bayonetta on the PS4. If Platinum ever decides to continue Sam and Elena's story, I'll be down, but I won't hold my breath anytime soon.